Avez-vous quelque objection à formuler quant à l'application des lois citées par l'accusateur public?
Le tribunal, après la déclaration unanime du jury, condamne la dénommée Marie Antoinette.
History remembers Marie Antoinette's last breath, but not the man who ended it. The executioner, Charles-Henri Sanson, who dropped the blade, kept his own account, and what he claimed to feel that day rewrites everything we think we know about her death. But who really was Charles-Henri Sanson? Charles-Henri Sanson was not a random figure pulled from the streets to execute royalty. He came from a long family line of professional executioners in France. The Sanson family had held the role for generations, making executions a grim family profession. By the time of the French Revolution, Charles-Henri Sanson was already experienced and well-known in Paris. He had overseen thousands of executions, long before Marie Antoinette ever faced the guillotine. To him, execution was not personal. It was a state duty, enforced by law. Sanson did not choose who lived or died. The Revolutionary Tribunal made those decisions. His role was to carry out the sentence, the guillotine, and the new age of execution. The French Revolution introduced the guillotine as a so-called humane method of execution. It was designed to be fast, consistent, and supposedly less painful. Sanson was one of the main operators trained to use this new device. The guillotine symbolized the cold efficiency of revolutionary justice. Executions became public events, and crowds gathered to watch. What was once hidden became a spectacle. Sanson later wrote that this change disturbed him deeply. Death was no longer private. It became political theater. On the 16th of October 1793, Marie Antoinette was taken to the Place de la Révolution. She was no longer treated as royalty. She wore plain white. Her hair had turned white from stress and imprisonment. Sanson reportedly observed her calm demeanor. Historical records describe her as composed and dignified. She accidentally stepped on Sanson's foot before the execution. Her final words to him were an apology. "Pardon me, sir. I did not do it on purpose."
Excusez-moi, monsieur.
Courage, madame.
These words are recorded in multiple historical accounts. According to writings attributed to Sanson and later historical summaries, he did not express hatred toward Marie Antoinette. He reportedly saw her as another condemned prisoner, not a symbol. However, he recognized the historical weight of that moment. He later acknowledged that executing a queen was unlike any other execution. It was not just a person, it was the end of an era. He understood the crowd was not watching justice, they were watching history turn. That awareness reportedly weighed heavily on him. Charles-Henri Sanson understood that he was not the one passing judgment, yet he was the one whose hands delivered the final moment. He stood at the end of a long chain of political and legal decisions, fully aware that history would remember the blade, not the paperwork. To the public, he became the face of death, even though he had no voice in who lived or died. Modern historians and psychologists who study historical trauma agree that Sanson almost certainly carried deep emotional strain. Executioners were trained to appear detached, calm, and mechanical in their movements. But emotional detachment is not the same as emotional immunity. Sanson carried out thousands of executions during the most violent phase of the French Revolution, particularly during the Reign of Terror, when death became routine rather than exceptional. On some days, the guillotine fell dozens of times. Each execution followed the same ritual, the same movements, the same final moments of fear, silence, or resistance. Over time, this repetition would have worn down even the strongest emotional defenses. Today, this kind of repeated exposure to violence would likely be recognized as a form of chronic psychological trauma. But in the 18th century, there was no language for post-traumatic stress, no counseling, no support systems. Instead, Sanson was expected to return home, eat dinner, and continue life as if nothing extraordinary had happened. The weight of thousands of final moments did not disappear when he left the scaffold. It followed him in memory, in sleep, and in silence. In many ways, his true sentence was not written by a court. It was carried in his mind, long after the blade had stopped falling. He was forced to separate emotion from duty, but records suggest he struggled privately. His writings reflect exhaustion and emotional conflict. The job demanded numbness to survive. Technology and the mechanics of death. The guillotine itself was a technological innovation of its time. It was designed to standardize death, reduce suffering, and remove human error. Ironically, it also removed emotional distance. The executioner no longer had to strike manually. He pulled a lever, and the machine did the rest. This mechanical separation changed how death was delivered. It made execution faster but not necessarily easier to live with. Why we never hear his voice. There are no audio recordings of Sanson audio technology that would not exist for another century. Everything we know comes from written memoirs, historical research, and second-hand accounts. Modern films and documentaries attempt to recreate his perspective. They are interpretations, not direct testimony. Still, these dramatizations help bring emotional context. They give voice to what history left silent. They allow modern audiences to imagine what it meant. To stand beneath the blade and pull the lever. Charles-Henri Sanson represents a side of history rarely discussed. The people who carried out orders, not by choice, but by profession. His story raises questions about responsibility, duty, and moral distance. He was not a revolutionary leader. He was not a royalist defender. He was a man caught between systems, forced to serve whichever government ruled. Despite working directly for the state, executioners like Sanson were socially isolated. In French society, executioners were often treated as untouchables. They could not easily marry outside their profession, and their children were frequently forced to inherit the same role. Many shops refused to serve them. Some churches restricted their participation. This meant that Sanson lived a strange double life, publicly powerful, privately rejected. Even as crowds depended on him, they avoided him in daily life. This social exile added another layer of emotional burden that was necessary, but never fully accepted. Execution was not just political, it was also a paid occupation. Sanson was compensated by the state for each execution. Additional payments were made for high-profile prisoners. During the Reign of Terror, this became a grim financial machine. The faster the tribunals worked, the more executions followed. This created a system where death had a measurable economic rhythm. The guillotine created distance between decision and consequence. Judges sentenced, clerks recorded, and executioners activated a machine. This layered system reduced personal accountability. No single person felt fully responsible. This is similar to modern automated warfare systems. The human hand is farther from the final moment. Sanson's role represents an early version of this technological moral distancing. He was part of a system where technology softened individual guilt. Sanson did not become famous by choice. History attached him to Marie Antoinette forever. Out of thousands of executions, one name followed him across centuries. This is how history compresses lives. It reduces complex people to a single moment. Sanson becomes the man who killed the queen. Not the man who lived decades in emotional and social isolation. Not the man who raised a family. Not the man who struggled under political chaos. Sanson's story forces modern viewers to confront this reality. At what point does duty become personal responsibility, or at what point does technology blur moral lines? His experience becomes a mirror for modern power structures. The tools have changed, but the moral weight has not. History often remembers the crown and forgets the hands that removed it. We remember Marie Antoinette as a queen, but rarely do we ask what it meant to be the man who ended her life. Charles-Henri Sanson did not write laws. He did not choose victims, but he carried the weight of every execution. And in doing so, he became a silent witness to one of history's bloodiest transformations. If this hidden side of history surprised you, then make sure to like this video, share, and subscribe to the channel. And comment below which historical figure's hidden truth you want uncovered next, because sometimes the most powerful stories belong to the people's history left in the shadows. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.